Welcome to Real Money, Real Life, the podcast where we get real about money and the messy human stuff that comes with it. I'm Linda Grizely, financial educator and your Me Money guide to financial clarity. Each week, we dive into financial concepts and money strategies, but we always tie it back to real life, emotions, mindset, and how money actually shows up day to day. If you're ready for practical tools, mindset shifts, and honest conversations that meet you where you are, not where the world thinks you should be, you're in the right place. Because you deserve to feel confident with your money and good about how you use it. No judgment, no lectures, and definitely no putting yourself last. Hello, everyone. If you're listening, you're one of the real ones. The ones ready to give yourself permission not just to spend well, but to earn boldly. Today, we're talking about giving yourself permission to make a lot of money. So often in the financial world, we focus on budgets, saving, and restraint. But what about the internal permission to earn, receive, and hold wealth? In this episode, we'll explore the consciousness behind money, what it really means to be wealthy, and how attention, belief, and self-worth influence what we allow into our lives. We're going to unpack the idea that abundance is a frequency and how shifting what we pay attention to can shift what we attract. My guest today is Cortney McDermott. She's an award-winning author and speaker and celebrity coach. Her work in self-development and business strategy has been featured in many publications and on stages worldwide. With a Master of Science from the London School of Economics, Cortney blends academic rigor with real-world experience to help individuals and organizations reach their highest potential. Her career highlights include executive roles at Vanity Fair Corporation, vice president at Sustainability Partners, Inc., and successfully running her own businesses where she has worked with brands such as Universal Music Group, Nike, Kickstarter, and Google. Fluent in 4 languages, Cortney splits her time between Italy and the U.S. Welcome, Cortney.
Hey, Linda, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, wonderful. 4 languages. Wow, that's an amazing feat in itself without all that other stuff that you talked about there.
Yeah, it sounds kind of exhausting actually. Whenever someone reads stuff from my CV, I'm like, oh man, that sounds like too much. But yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like though you also talk the language of money. So tell us more about how you got into talking about money.
Well, it came out a lot around the writing of my second book. I realized this is such a big piece of what I see a lot of creative entrepreneurs, especially just kind of not giving themselves that permission. It's almost like I either do what I love or I do something that I don't like to make money, quote unquote. And I think the entire idea of making money is itself a bit of it's misleading. We don't really make it. It comes as a result of what our talents are, what we share, what we're able to give. And so personally, when I started realizing that, and I started realizing that we have this access to riches that lives within us, I started to sort of reverse things, sort of reverse engineer what would it look like to feel those riches before you have them? What would it feel like to know that you're actually designed to introduce and share your talents and get paid handsomely for it? What would that look like? And how is it actually reflected too back in the science of what's happening in your brain, what's happening in your body when you connect with those sensations, and getting out of that loop that we're in of we need to make it happen, we need to make money, all of that kind of conditioning that, as I said, I think is misleading at best, and well, I don't know at worst, but it's misleading for sure.
Yeah, and I think, you talk about like how do you feel that? How do you change that vibration? And I think the biggest question I have is how do you give yourself permission to do that? How do you make yourself do that? And how do you give yourself permission to make a lot of money? What does that mean?
Yeah, well, first, again, I think we need to tap into the frequency of what is not just the frequency, and I am talking in terms of real frequencies, which we'll get to in a second, but also what's driving the desire for wealth? What's driving the desire for what we call more money, right? Money comes from currency, which comes from corrente, which means flow. And what I find over and over when I'm talking to people is actually when I dig, just within seconds, what I find is it's not necessarily the money, it's the freedom. It's the sense of I made it. I was giving a talk to 1,000 female entrepreneurs a few years back, and someone asked the question in the audience. She said, how do I make my first million? And I said, okay, great. We can get there. I said, only first, why do you want? What would you do with that, or why do you want it? And she said, well, I could support my team better. I could do this. I could do that. And I said, okay, well, and what would that mean? And we dug for, I think it was 20 or 30 seconds at most. And what she came to and she broke down was, I'd finally feel like I'm enough. And so before we ever get to the question of more money, we need to sit with the question of what does it represent? What does it represent for you? Which is the wholeness that we know at our core, which is the freedom that we were born with, which is all the stuff that we have forgotten and that we are called to remember. And so first and foremost, we get with that. And then we start to tune into what is the frequency of it. And when I say frequency, I am not talking woo woo, let's kind of ride some waves. I mean, that's great too, but I'm talking about the literal brainwave frequencies that you are emitting when you're in a state of calm and peace and knowing that you already have all of the riches you are seeking, because the truth behind the riches exists within you. And I'm telling you, I've seen some really wealthy people in terms of money who were very poor. And I've met some extremely poor people who were very, very wealthy. And it's knowing the differences that we're talking about here. It's getting those principles. And once you've got those principles, the physical representation of how that shows up in your life may change. It may vary. Sometimes it might come in the form of money. Sometimes riches come in the form of exchange. An exchange of talents is one of the greatest riches ever. And so you start to tune into the frequency. And again, we're talking about real brainwave frequencies here. So if you want, we can get into that. But ultimately, what I'm suggesting is let's relax. Remember that we are the thing that we're seeking. It's kind of like you had the ruby slippers the whole time. And watch as the reflection of that begins to appear. And that's also just your electromagnetic frequency, not just your brainwave frequencies. So yeah, again, we can talk about it if you want, but.
Yeah, let's go ahead and go right there. Go into the brainwave frequencies and how all the things, like whatever you want to say about that. You tell us, you're the expert. Tell us about the brainwave frequencies.
Sure. Well, see, here's the thing. I don't know if I'm the expert, but what I do know is that I started to stumble upon, especially brainwave frequencies in my work. I was trying to figure out how certain stuff was happening because I was seeing transformations that were happening, radical transformations that were happening overnight with myself and the people that I work with. And I wrote about some of those in the book because I was sort of like, I was dumbfounded. So I wanted to understand and dig into the best I could, because I guess technically I am a scientist because I have a master in sciences, but not in these fields. But I wanted to understand, what is neuroscience saying about it? What is epigenetics saying about it? What is quantum theory saying about it? And to the best of my ability, piece those together in a way that showed that your consciousness is determining what you're experiencing. And so in terms of brainwave frequencies specifically, I had been intensely studying different frequencies and how to move in and out of them. And I was really looking at, in particular, the one that we're in most of the time, because most people are in beta most of the time when they're awake, and they're in high range beta. Now, when we talk about these frequencies, we're talking about cycles per second in your brain, so kind of how quickly it's moving, but not just that, because when you're in high beta, it's also very erratic, because there can be very fast frequencies like gamma, for instance, which we won't get into, but gamma is very, very fast, but it's harmonious. And so the way you live it is almost, you're literally having a transcendent experience. And I've been in states like that, and it's remarkable. But beta is where most people are spending most of their time. And the best way I ever heard that described is like having a 4-gear race car that you're driving around in first gear all day long. So it's like pedal the metal, I'm going to get there. And that is, to harken back to the beginning of our conversation, that's the make it happen. That's, I got to make money. I got to do all these things. And so when we're in high beta, if we get there, it's not going to really feel that great. Another thing I like to liken it to is what I talk about, the 4 ways of getting ice cream. So the first way is it would be this high beta, and it would be, oh, I gotta have ice cream, and it's 3 a.m. and you know it's not the right thing for you then, and nothing's open, but you're in America, so you can go to a 7-Eleven and you get a freezer burn variety and you eat it, and it's nasty, and you feel sick, and you wake up the next morning, why did I do that? Okay, that is high beta. We might get there. We likely will. But the wear and tear is enormous. And in the meantime, we could have gotten there in easier ways, and we could have had our ice cream a better variety in a much better way as we move through these frequencies. So as you move through beta, beta goes into mid-range and low-range beta, and there you do start to become more relaxed. You start to become more aware of other potentials that are available to you. You start to just open up to more possibility. And then as you slip into alpha, which is really easy to slip into, by the way. I mean, it doesn't require much, and we can get to that if you'd like. But when you start slipping into alpha is when you begin to experience much more creativity. And you, again, open up to possibilities. And it would be like the second way of getting ice cream, where the thought impulse occurs for the ice cream, and you call somebody, you say, hey, Court, I'd really love some ice cream. And I say, Linda, I'd be super happy to pick up for you. I'm just going to stop by the store and bring it to you. Like, holy smokes, how did I do that? Right. And this is when we start to have teams. We start to have people helping us. We notice the way life shows up to support us. This is us literally being in a different brainwave frequency. It's not magic. And then as you move into theta, most people only experience theta and delta when they're sleeping, but you can experience them eyes wide open. Theta is where you start to release things like catecholamines, which are vital for learning and memory. You start to become much more aware of potentials that you had never before been aware of. And then there's delta. And again, that's usually deep sleep, and that's associated with things like human growth hormone. I mean, you are real-time youthing. So these states are accessible in meditation. They're accessible sometimes for people when they dance. They're accessible with certain types of music. When you have that and you're like, oh, and so if you look at the other ways of getting ice cream, the third way then would be the thought impulse occurs for the ice cream, and someone shows up at your door and just has this amazing gourmet ice cream and says, I just got that. And it's a friend. And they say, I just got this ice cream. Would you like it? And you can't believe when this happens, right? And we've all had experiences like this. The one that most people tend to get right away is you were just thinking of someone and then that someone called. That's theta. That's our interconnectedness. That's our knowing that we're part of something bigger. And it extends to money. Because again, money is its own consciousness. It's its own form of consciousness. It's its own frequency. So we're aligning to it with our brainwave frequencies. And then the last way of getting ice cream is you think of ice cream and the ice cream just appears, seemingly out of nowhere. And when I talk to people about it, they're like, oh, I don't know about that. But it's like those times where you were trying so hard to find something, or you were trying to remember a name. This is the one that's easiest for people to get, but it can happen with physical things. But you're just trying to, and all of a sudden you relax totally. You maybe lie down, and all of a sudden, oh, it comes to you. You remember that thing you were struggling so hard because you couldn't get there because you were in the wrong frequency. And it doesn't just, we're not talking just about our cerebral mind here. I mean, every single body mind that you have or organ that you have has is basically its own mind. That's why you hear so many conversations about the heart or the gut, or people say, I just feel it in my heart. The heart is a great example. I mean, it has its own set of neurocircuitry. It is truly a mind. And it's the electromagnetic field around your heart is hundreds, if not thousands of times stronger than that around your cerebral mind, which we've seen from studies like the I can't remember the name of that machinery that was developed by that scientist to measure it, but also the Heart Math Institute more recently, all these kinds of things. So we know that we are actually sending signals and we are receiving the matches of those. So again, this isn't woo-woo. This is just basic kind of 101 that we should have been taught in school.
Yeah, interesting. I always say that people should have been taught more about money in school, but this too, because I think understanding the power of your brain and the power of your thoughts is huge. Now, I want to go back to theta because you mentioned that this is the state that we get into sometimes through meditation or dance and music and interconnectedness. But you mentioned something that I don't know the description of, which is catecholamines. I'm not sure if I'm even saying that right. So talk more about that and awareness and how we can move from the alpha into this theta phase?
Yeah, so catecholamines, I mean, really, we're talking about chemical messengers that are being released from the brain. So when you're in some of these states, even as you get into alpha, for instance, your brain is producing more serotonin. When you're in that high range beta we were talking about, your brain is producing a massive amount of cortisol. It's producing adrenaline in ways that don't serve you, right? These things in and of themselves are not so much a problem. It's the magnitude of, when we're really forcing something, it's how much of that gets released into our bloodstream. So we can't even see. So we go into that classic fly, fight, freeze, because our amygdala is activated and we can't see options and opportunities. So that's the first part. I missed the second part of the question. What was the second part?
Was explaining what it is, and which you just did, and then also how can we help ourselves get to that? Because you said it's usually experienced through meditation, dance, music. How can we tap more into this frequency?
Yeah. So I love this question, and especially for people who are listening to a podcast like this, because there are people who have, tried all the things and they've worked really hard and they really want to learn and they really want to do a good job. And I will tell every single person until as long as I breathe, go lie down. It's the thing that we don't want to do. It's the non doing. It's like, I have to get horizontal. The brilliant thing about what happens when you just lay your body down is that you start within seconds moving into these frequencies. Sometimes you might be in such extreme high beta where people are in extreme anxiety. And then I usually suggest some sort of movement before you relax, because your body also has to release some of that excess flood of those neurotransmitters we were talking about a minute ago that are really doping you up. So you might need to take some movement before this if you're feeling really like, I can't move, go outside, breathe in the air, just walk. And with no aim, like you're not doing this to get somewhere, because then we're back in the same conundrum of making it happen. We're back in the same fallacy. Okay. Instead, when we relax into the potential, and I often say, people will say, oh, I don't have that time to relax. I can't. And I will always, I kind of borrow from the Dalai Lama. He was talking about meditation. And I say, if you think you don't have 5 minutes, please take an hour, because that's when we need it most. And so what's happening is, because of the fact that our brain associates lying down with going to sleep, we will naturally start moving with the greatest ease. The easiest way that we can is really just to do this, because that's where our brain says, oh, she's finally out of the way. Let me relax these frequencies here. Now, another way to kind of help it along is yawning. So yawning is considered it's considered the best kept secret in neuroscience. It's been called that. And it's because yawning is both energizing and relaxing at the same time, which is kind of remarkable. It's why animals do it before and after a fight. It's why it's just one of those built-in technologies that, just like lying down, we were taught was bad. Somewhere along the line, most of us got the message that we shouldn't do that thing. But we have these technologies for a reason. There's a reason why we need to sleep. There's a reason why we need to rest. And so when we start to go back in and say, oh, I'm going to just see what's my original equipment. So yawning is a great one. Lying down is a great one. Laughing is an excellent one. If you can, anything that kind of can make you laugh, or if you know a person who makes you laugh, or a stand-up comedian, great. Because again, you're starting to release some of those neurochemicals that say, I'm safe, I'm okay, which, by the way, is at the foundation of all of this. You feeling safe. People feeling safe to make the money. People feeling safe to be in the frequency of freedom, to experience what it means to feel safe and free and taken care of, which, as far as I can tell, is, again, also original equipment. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And feeling safe and free is the key to so many things, because you can't even open up your mind to any sense of possibility when you don't feel safe or free.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's talk more about why people might subconsciously cap their earning potential.
Oh, yeah. I think again, and again, this is as far as I can tell. I'm not an expert in this, but I think, or maybe in anything, but as what I see is that we get afraid sometimes of wanting something. We get afraid of what it could mean if we get it. It's funny. I think sometimes people are more afraid of what it could mean when they get it than what it would mean if they didn't get it. But we've been taught, and we've been really kind of learned helplessness taught to settle into to avoid things that scare us, right? And so newness tends to scare us. The idea of things changing, which is I mean, it's just so funny because we are afraid of things changing, and yet we know that everything is constantly changing and that is the only constant. And so it's just, for me, it's so funny the way that we get duped and then we continue to dupe ourselves. So when people have a set point, for usually what it's telling me is they have some kind of story, and it's been repeated a lot, and they've started to calcify into it. So they're literally almost like they're covered in mud. And the truth about the ability to have it, to experience freedom, to experience safety is there, and it's just covered under all this muck. And so even when you were asking me earlier about the things to do, and I was talking about the not doing of lying down, also just moving is a great way to start to demuck. Expressing it, like not being afraid to say, oh my God, I'm afraid. Just expressing is one of those ways that we start to free up the energy. Because literally, if you look at it, we have gotten these things clogged into our system. So if we go back to those body minds and we look at what neuropeptides like that do, the ones that we were talking about of cortisol and norepinephrine and all these other ones going down into basically getting lodged into our vital organs, the way we start to free that up is to oxygenate, is to move. And this is one of the things that I discovered for myself over and over again in terms of what it looked like to be more free. It required me to move the energy out of where it had been priorly stuck. So that's also something that I will usually counsel, especially women, because oh man, we have so much kind of put on us in terms of what we are told we need to be, how we need to be, what it needs to look like, da 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 da, blah blah blah. Ad nauseum. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of that tells us what we're worth,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so a lot of the things that we are thinking internally, we don't even realize it about what we think we're worth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we talked about frequency, and we talked about the idea that you could be holding yourself back. How do we start to shift what we pay attention to so that we're having that right frequency to attract?
Ooh. I almost want to go back to the worthiness thing first, if that's okay with you, because
Yeah, go
a
right ahead.
story
Yeah,
popped
love to
up
talk
while
about
you
that.
were saying it. This story flashed into my mind, which is one of my favorites to share about wealth and about money. And it's a story of a mystic who is wandering the streets, I think, of India. And this man runs up to him and he says, "Give me the stone. Give me the stone." And the mystic says, "The stone?" He says, "Yes, I had a dream last night. Krishna came to me and said that if you gave me the stone that you have in your possession, I would be the richest man in the world." And the mystic stops and he rummages in his sack and he pulls out the largest diamond ever seen. And he says, This stone?" And he says, "Yes, yes." The other man, "Give me the stone." And he says, "Oh, yes, I found it yesterday. Here, take it." And he passes it to the man. And the man runs off and he's so excited and he has the stone. And after a while of running, he stops and he sits and he reflects on what just happened. And he slowly makes his way back to the mystic and he says, "Here, take the stone back. Can you give me the riches that made it possible for you to give this away so freely?"
It's impactful. Yeah.
When you know what's inside of you, you're not searching anymore. And we all have access to that. And as far as I can tell, again, this is just as far as I've gotten in my own journey, a lot of it's about your talents. So when you ask about directing and you ask about, kind of pulling our focus back in, so we can become more active participants in what we want to experience versus what we don't. What I've seen is that the more you develop your talents, which are innate to you, which reminds me of the parable of the talents. Have you ever heard that one? It's another really good one about it has to do with money.
No,
Okay,
please tell us.
so this one comes from the Bible, and I may be getting this slightly off, but more or less the storyline's correct. It's been many years since I visited the Bible, but the idea is this master leaves three of his servants with these talents, and at the writing of the Bible, the talents, what the translation of that was money. And so he leaves the first one with 5 talents, and the second one with 2 talents, and the last one he leaves with 1 talent. And he leaves them there, and he lets them do their thing. And he comes back at a certain point and he says, "How did you get on with your talents?" And the one with 5 says, "Oh my God, this was incredible. I got another 5. I doubled my talents." And the master says, "Excellent." And he gives him double that. And then he goes to the next one and he says, "How about you?" And he says, "Well, me too. It was incredible. I got more. I didn't quite double it, but I got more." And the master says, "Excellent. Here, take some more." And he goes to the last one. He says, "How about you?" And he says, "Well, couldn't really figure it out. I just buried it." And the master takes that 1 talent away. We all come with talents. Again, you can interchange these words: talents, money, currency. You can just interchange them. The question is, what are you doing with them? How are you settling into those potentials? How are you, to your question, are you directing yourself back to what you are actually able to affect? Because very, very little of what's going on are we able to affect in any way whatsoever. But the one thing that we do get this free will over, it seems, is where we put our attention. That seems to be the greatest use of our free will. So if we can, as much as we are able, take the attention off of all the stuff that's scaring us, and just gently, very gently, that's why I say get horizontal first, but very gently guide it back and say, "I got this talent." People say this thing about me. It's funny. People so long. I remember also when I was working in corporate, they would say, "Oh, you're so enthusiastic. You're too enthusiastic." I would get that. "Oh, you're too enthusiastic." And then I realized enthusiasm, it comes from entheos. That means in God, in spirit. We all have connection to this, however you want to call that, intelligence. And how much are you actually willing to show up for that? How much are you letting it guide where your attention goes, where your focus goes, where your activity goes? And it's a really vitally important question, the one you're asking. And I think it's the one that we get to go back to if we want to start changing our relationship with things like money. Yeah.
So let's talk about then once we make that shift, when someone moves from scarcity to possibility, what does that look like?
Oh, it could go any which way, Linda. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it go a bunch of ways. I've seen people flip out and not know what to do with it. This is, the classic when you hear that someone wins the lottery and then they lose it all within half a year or whatever. And here's the thing, and this comes back to the topic that we're discussing underlying all of this, which is that it's a consciousness, right? So lots of times people say, "Oh, you just need to do this thing." But if you don't believe you are the thing, you can't do it. So if people don't believe themselves to have a wealth mindset, it is going to be very hard for them to learn investment strategies. It is going to be very hard for them to go and budget and do the things that someone will tell them that they need to do in order to experience that. It'll be hard for them to invest early and start seeing the effects of compound interest, what supposedly Einstein, it's been attributed to different people, but the 8th wonder of the universe, right? Like, people aren't going to get exposed to that if they don't have the underlying belief that they can be that. And so what I will often, just kind of suggest is, let's go back to what's the being of it. Like, what does freedom feel like in for you? Like, what does it mean? What does it translate to? What does it look like? So that you can start making the decisions, like start responding in different ways. Because to just go back to this last one, I mean, you can see it go every which way once people go from scarcity to having more abundance, because either they went from that because they stepped into the consciousness of abundance, or it kind of just happened, and then their set point goes back to scarcity. So I've seen all kinds of shades of that. Like I said, I'm sure you have too. But again, I think it all comes back to your consciousness and where it's directed and how it's directed, rather than having a specific technique or tactic that you employ to, again, get it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense.
Okay.
And I think, at the beginning I talked about giving yourself permission to make a lot of money, but it's permission not to earn, but to receive.
Ooh, yes. To receive
And I
and
think
to
there's a lot.
give, it's like once you receive, you have so much more to give. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know how, I guess we got really duped, a lot of us, into thinking that, it's wrong or bad or people with a lot of money or whatever, but no. People with wealth consciousness are the ones that they become, and you've probably heard this before. I've heard it and I love it so much. Money just amplifies who you are. That's all it does. If you were living, and this goes back to the question before this, or the point before this last one. If you were living in scarcity before, money is going to create more scarcity. You have people who have millions and millions in the bank, and they lose a couple million and they kill themselves. I mean, there are many stories like that. That's scarcity mindset with money, a lot of it. So again, there's no escaping this piece. There's just no escaping it. You could amass all the money you want and still be very, very poor. You could make nothing and be the richest person on earth. Again, having that awareness that we talked about with the diamond. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that comes to, what does it really truly mean to be wealthy? It's not just about money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so I always like to talk about mindset and the stories that people tell themselves and the internal blocks. What do you think are the main things that you see that hold people back from wealth?
Well, one thing is mindset itself. So, people are always talking about, oh, just change the way you think and everything's going to change. And, we get all that messaging, and then we think, oh crap, like it hasn't changed and I must be a bad person, or I can't make my thoughts go the way that I want to make them go. Well, I always tell people, please, 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 I beg of you, do not start at the level of the thought. Do not. Most people are having somewhere between 50 to 70,000 thought impulses a day. And the reason why I say thought impulses is because most people are not actively directing the thinking process at all. To say that I think for the vast majority of humanity is the equivalent of saying I beat my heart. You would never say I beat my heart, because there is an intelligence beating your heart. It doesn't work in exactly the same way as far as I can tell, but the thoughts, right? Again, if we're having 50 to 70,000 thoughts a day, which is the average person having between 50 to 70,000 thoughts a day, okay? And for most people, those are the same thought impulses every day. And again, another reason why I say thought impulse is because we don't even know the origin of thought. Like, there's not a part of your brain that I can point to, like the prefrontal cortex, and say thought originates there. We don't, the scientists can't tell us. What we do know is that they're electrical impulses. So you're getting hit with thousands, tens of thousands of these a day. And again, if those are the same ones, they are literally they are calcifying you into a specific form. So if people are constantly thinking, I'm not enough, I don't have enough, this is never going to be enough, whatever that is, those thought impulses, again, that are not your fault, because you have not been taught how to direct them. We don't get this training. It's an absurdity and a gross, what's the word? Just I can't think of the word, but it's a gross misgiving, or I don't know. I'm looking for a specific word. But the point is, our educational system doesn't teach us. Like, doesn't teach us how to think. Can you imagine that? We get taught how to memorize things. We get taught that we have to behave in a certain way, that we shouldn't yawn, that we shouldn't take a nap at school, all these kinds of things, which are things that we probably should do in order to learn, right? Again, we're taught to avoid and discount our original equipment, and we are not taught how to use these operating systems. So again, going back, I will often tell people, please, please, please don't start at the level of the thought, because you are in for, it's like you are facing Everest and you're in a pair of shorts and you don't even have boots on. Okay. And instead, if we look at playing around with questions, questions are very, very powerful. And the reason that is they sort of bypass the unconscious and subconscious beliefs that we hold. And the way our brain is designed, there's a part of our brain that's like a mapping system. It's called the reticular activating system. And it's designed, it's a network. It's designed to find answers to the predominant questions you have, or the predominant beliefs you have, or the things that are of importance to you in that moment. And everyone's experienced this. I remember years ago, I didn't know what that part of the brain was, but I remember I started working at the North Face, the outdoor company. And then next thing I know, everywhere I went, people were wearing North Face jackets. And I was like, what, did everybody just decide to go out and, invest in North Face and buy North Face, since I started working there? No. My brain was saying, this is now important to Cortney. Let me bring it into her field. And everyone's had this with a new car or whatever else it is, right? And then you think, oh, that's so interesting. I never saw this before. And now it's everywhere. I have to say Teslas really are everywhere. So in California, but where I am now. But anyhow, I digress. The point that I'm making is that we have this part of our brain. It's like a search engine, only infinitely more powerful. And its job is literally to find the answers to those key things that you're putting in and that are really charged for you. So if you can find a question that charges you around money, that's even, how do I feel more freedom? That again is not about the material representation of that through something we call money, but is actually, how do I experience more freedom? And then you'll start to notice, oh my gosh, this thing came up. Like my boss decided that they were going to let me work some hours from home, or whatever that is. You will start finding those representations in your field because you have no choice but to, because that's how your brain is designed. So I love to tell people, play with the questions. I also think that moving, as we were talking about earlier, again, we got a lot of stuck, stagnant energy. We think things are psychological. We say, oh, I just can't get past that. But the fact of the matter is, this is stuck, stagnant energy in your body. So I learned this. I learned this years ago. I was like, oh crap, I got to shake. I was introduced at the time I was working. Someone on my team sent me this video from this woman. She was leading a movement called Koya, which stands for Queen. And she sent me this video that this woman had put out, this woman, Rochelle. And in the video, she says, she invites everyone to shake every part of their body to this song, as she's telling this story of a gazelle. And the gazelle is being chased through the grasslands by a tiger. The gazelle gets away. However, the gazelle does not go to therapy for the next 10 years, about the time that it was being chased by a tiger. Sorry, there's some hammering going on. I was not expecting this. I asked them to not work while I was talking, but they decided to work anyway. So anyhow, so she doesn't go to therapy about this time that the tiger's chasing her. What she does is she shakes through every part of her body, releasing the tension, releasing the fear, and goes back to being a gazelle. Okay. So the reason that story is just to illustrate, we've got stuck stuff in our body. If we move, if we shake, if we walk for 5 minutes, if we just get away from our computer long enough for our brainwave frequencies to drop into alpha and just our whole system and body to relax, our shoulders, our chest, everything, we are inviting in that which we become a match for, again, in terms of literal frequencies. Does that make sense?
It does. Okay. So if you could take everything you just said and break it down to one tiny practice that someone could try to start doing this week to shift their consciousness, what would it be?
I go back to absolutely go lie down. It's a non-practice. Okay. Like, I don't want you to do anything before that. And literally, it's just, let's unlearn that we need to strive and we need to do all these things, and we need one more thing. Like, anyone who's listened this far, first of all, hats off, kudos to you. You're awesome. I mean, the fact that you're here and listening to something and like this and advancing in this way and are tuned into Linda and what she's doing. Whoa. And secondly, you probably don't need to be doing more. You probably need to stop. And once you stop, it's this remarkable thing. I've seen it over and over. The minute I relaxed, it's sort of a funny combination. I talk about it in the second book of how I moved into different frequencies and different states and how things started just coming to me. Was I relaxed, And in my case, I got a little goofy. I was just like, this is funny. This is really funny how hard I'm trying here. And boom, it just set in. Whatever it was that I was wanting, wherever I was striving before, I let go of it in the best way of just relaxing. It's like all the threads just kind of got unwoven and it could become something else.
Yeah. I think when you're talking about that, I think of all the times where I've laid down and gotten in bed at night and closed my eyes, and then I'm like, "Oh my God, I remember this. Like I forgot to do this,"
Yes.
or that thing that I was trying to remember earlier is like that's what the answer was. Or even sometimes in the shower, like you're relaxing in the shower and then the thought comes into your head and you're like, "Oh yeah." So I totally get it. I've seen it in my own life happen when it wasn't intentional. So the idea to do it intentionally could be life
It's
changing.
life change. It is such a game changer. I have two friends who their moments are in the shower, and one of them, she has a, I don't know, these guys really want to bang today. One of them,
That's
it's
okay.
okay. It's all good. It's like music in the background, but just music that you're like, wait, that's a little out of beat. Anyhow, this one woman in the shower, she has a whiteboard and she literally she writes ideas on this whiteboard, and the other woman brings her phone and she'll dictate these things in her phone. I have started to intentionally just go get horizontal every time I need to do something big, every time I need to write a client summary, every time. And it's like my brain is like AI. I mean, I don't even use AI. I only use it for recipes, really. And I feel like my brain does that. Like I will sit with a client and then I just go lie down and I get a full, perfect, beautiful, like eloquent summary and action points of things, but nothing about it is contrived. It's so clear and so pure. And I think it's a massive game changer. I'm going to mute this so you can talk and we don't hear the hammering.
Okay. All right. So I love this. And I'm as you're talking about it, I'm thinking about, all the times when you try to implement something where you're trying to like move from scarcity to abundance or negativity to positivity, you have to work on it. And so for the people listening, like I'm going to try this. I'm going to try laying down because I know that I've seen that happen for me. But I also am aware that it's probably not going to happen perfectly the first time. Like I'm going to have to start a practice of it and over time it will improve. So I'm not going to go lay down for my first time and expect, like you said, you have like everything comes clear and like you're ready to go and you've got your client follow-ups, whatever. That's not going to happen the first time. Like, but as the more you get used to exercising this practice, the easier it will get.
Yes. And I definitely did not start like this. And even other things like videos or talking or whatever didn't start like this. But the more I realized that, oh my God, the one principle behind my being able to show up fully is relaxing. Relaxing. I was even talking about this the other day in a little video. I was like, oh my God, vulnerability is not about airing dirty laundry or all this kind of stuff. It's about deeply relaxing in one another's presence. Like that's what it means to be
Yeah.
vulnerable. I don't need to be anything for you. I don't need to perform. I don't need to show up in a certain way because I'm deeply relaxed. And then I can share that state with whoever's around me and they can experience that as much as they're able to access it, right? But just because you are the thing. And so I didn't have those right away, but the more you start listening, the more you start actively listening to yourself and just getting with yourself and grooving with yourself and relaxing like that, it's like a compound interest thing. At the beginning, you're like, oh, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. Forget it, forget it, forget it. And, it's like, it's not accumulating. And next thing you know, it's a fortune. It's a fortune. It's a hammering
Yeah.
fortune. It just won't stop.
Courtney, tell us how people can find you.
Yes. So my name is Cortney without a U. So it's CORT, and we have CORTINC.com or Cortney McDermott. You can find those handles everywhere, Instagram, LinkedIn. I really love, and I try to read everyone that comes through. I have a team that helps me with all the social stuff. But I always ask, if someone was affected, if someone's changed. We've gotten hundreds of testimonials about the way people's lives have changed also financially since reading the book or hearing a talk or listening to an interview. And I really love getting that feedback because it helps me to adjust what was useful, what's impacting, what's in resonance. And so that we can start experiencing collectively more of that. Like, I don't want to be I don't want to be experiencing this alone. I want us all to get to experience what this kind of, freedom feels like. So I love people getting in touch and sharing their stories and connecting in those ways. And you can find me there. And the books are available anywhere books are sold. The audiobooks, I did them myself. Again, it's a frequency thing. So I wanted to make sure that it was my voice. It took me a while and there was a lot of demand, but we got them out there last year. So that's really exciting. And people can get those on iTunes or Spotify, wherever you get your audio.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Cortney. I appreciate you spending your time and sharing your wisdom with us. And everyone, I have a closing nugget for you. And that is that you don't have to shrink your dreams to feel responsible. You can be grounded and abundant at the same time. Thanks so much for listening today. Thanks so much for listening to Real Money, Real Life. Want to see what's blocking you from financial confidence or discover your money personality? Head to the resources page at lindagriz.com for our free quizzes. That's LINDAGRIZ.com/resources. If you're loving what you're learning, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. I'm your Me Money Guide to Financial Clarity, Linda Grizely, and I'll catch you next time as we talk more real money, real life, because you deserve to feel confident with your money and good about how you spend it. The content shared here is for educational and entertainment purposes only. It is not financial, tax, legal, or planning advice and does not constitute therapy or mental health counseling. Please consult an actively licensed and qualified professional for advice or help specific to your situation.